Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. I'm so honored to have today's guest, Shannon Wallace, with us today. I met Shannon at an online university, I guess it's called, that really helps people understand how to communicate their needs, how to set healthy boundaries, how to connect with God. So many just rich topics. And Shannon was my mentor, which was so fun. We had a small kind of transformation group, and I got to know her a little bit. And I'm just so moved by the woman that she is. She's sweet as pie and strong and resilient. And I'm just so honored for our guests to get to meet her today. So, Shannon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and you're sweet as pie too.
Thank you. Could you start off just sharing with listeners just a bit about who you are, um, where you're from, anything you want to start off with?
Well, where I'm from. Well, y'all, there's a clue. I've lived in Texas most of my life, but I can't claim it as 100% home. I grew up on the prairie of Oklahoma on a farm the first 10 years of my life. And then we moved to Texas and um, yeah, yeah. And then fast forward, married a lovely man in the military. He's now retired. And we had two boys, and I homeschooled, which I just retired from that. I can't even believe I'm saying that. It makes me feel really old, but I'm not. I'm not old.
No.
Um, and yeah, lots of stuff in between there. But random fact, I love my Texas wildflowers. I
Yeah.
cannot wait for that. We have about 6 weeks and we'll start to see some of the beauty, the Texas bluebonnets and the Indian paintbrush. And I'm looking forward to that after winter, which I know ours are mild compared to north, but I'm looking forward to that. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I love helping people, and it was a huge blessing to be your mentor. And that's just kind of my passion is to just to get to know other people, especially women, and hear their story and just try to maybe help or coach them along. And we all struggle in life. We
Yeah.
all do, and we all need encouragement.
Yeah. It's so helpful to have, yeah, a guide or someone to ask good questions along the way.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to rewind. What was it like growing up on a farm?
Well, exciting. I was definitely a little bit of a tomboy. I loved to play in the dirt.
Hmm.
Loved it. Um, so it was technically my grandparents. It was my papa really that had the farm. He grew wheat. And
Wow.
so I remember running through the wheat fields and riding it in the back of we called it the wheat truck, and hauling the grain to the place. I don't
Wow.
think it was very far away, but in town. But yeah, grew up with chickens, and there were always cows, and it was just, I don't know, it felt like a really natural, when I think back to how kids kind of grow up now and how I grew up, it just was super, I guess, organic and natural. Like I got to be outside a lot, and that's where I wanted to be. I didn't want to be inside. I wanted to be out in the dirt playing or making up games. I was an only child for 8 years, so I did a lot of playing by myself.
Hmm.
But I just have always loved being outside. So I
Hmm.
think it was a blessing. When I look back on it, I was super blessed to grow up like that.
Yeah, that's so fun. Did you have like neighbors and farms nearby, or was it mostly with your family?
Um, we didn't, they had neighbors closer to them. So we were a few acres apart from my grandparents. Um, it's not really, not in the sense of, and we lived on a kind of major highway.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't just walk down the road to the nearest
Sure.
neighbor. So yeah, my grandparents basically were our neighbors. And um, I could walk from the pasture safely over there and all the time. I go visit and um, always being cautious of mama cows and the bull.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, it's so neat. I live in the suburbs, so I think farm life is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you're a farm kid, I remember I want to move to this city. I don't know what my fascination was. I think it's because there was, all the restaurants and
Mm,
there was the movie theater and the bowling alley. And I think that was maybe my fascination because I grew up in a tiny town we barely had a grocery store. And so looking back on it, and I live in the country now, I would pick living in the country any
mm.
day over the city, though I do love things in the city.
Yeah, yeah, both. That's so fun. And for the Texas wildflowers, is that kind of do they all bloom at once? Or is it kind of like I don't know, do people wait for them to start blooming? Or do you have just like a special interest in flowers and nature?
I do have a special interest in flowers and nature for sure. I love botany. I've actually had my own garden, not at this house, but a couple houses ago. I had a huge garden, and as a kid, we always had a garden. But concerning the wildflowers, so people do travel here to see them,
Wow.
and more so in the Texas Hill Country, but we do have them out here too. They love the Texas bluebonnets and the Indian paintbrush, but the Texas bluebonnets are the famous ones, kind of that blue purple hue with the white top. They're in the lupine family. Little trivia.
I love
Um, and so those are the first, and they go really quick. They don't have a long lifespan. And so people do travel here, and then the locals will go get Easter pictures out in them because they're just iconic. But there's many others that bloom. We really they can start in some of the wildflowers in February, the phlox, and then you really get then the blue bonnets in more like late March, early April, and then you have uh, the fire wheels and
that.
poppies, which the poppies I think were imported. That's more of a
Oh,
like a California thing, but they plant them out here. Um, you have some that go all the way into July. And
oh,
so, yeah, it's a different,
yeah,
different phases of growth and germination. But yeah, it's kind of a big deal to us
yeah.
Texans.
Oh, so fun. I like to learn about um, what states are value or have how they have unique things to them. So that's neat.
Right. Yeah.
Heard about
Yeah.
the Texas wildflowers before.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you homeschooled your kids. What was that like?
Wow. Well, it is something that I would do it again. Would I do it differently? Yeah, there's things I would change. One of the biggest things was you go into it thinking a lot of things. Like, okay, we're just going to set up a desk and, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And it didn't look anything like that because I realized I didn't want to duplicate public school at home. I wanted us to have our own special experience,
Yeah.
which is what we did. And one of the other things is I walked away with an education myself. When you're in a classroom setting, they have their plan that they have to go by, and a lot of times it has to follow the state standard to pass a test.
Mhm.
And you really have the freedom with homeschooling to teach what's important to you for your child to learn. Of course, you want them to learn basics. They need
Mhm.
to learn how to read. They need to learn how to compute and do, mathematics. They need to know science, and history is super important too. We need to know what's happened,
Mhm.
before us. But I I walked away with an education myself. For example, botany, we were just talking about the Texas bluebonnets. My son, Evan, oh my goodness, that kid loved, I mean, he just plants and everything, and he could name them and at a very young age. It was a really
Mhm.
crazy God-given gift that one time kind of arguing over a tree. And I was like, no, 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 it's not that. He's like, yes, it is. And I went and got our book. I know, not a guidebook. Anyway, like that,
Yeah.
that shows you. And he was right. I'm like, this kid has a gift. This was at about 6 years old.
Wow.
So, yeah, because you can really focus and you only teach to your children and your class size is smaller. It doesn't take as long to get through lessons. And then you can really hone in on what they love and their passions. And we did that for a long time. And
Mm.
I came away with a love for botany and nature and really just understanding things that I didn't have the opportunity to learn in school. So I came away, yeah, and even math. Oh my goodness. I learned how to actually do fractions properly because I had the time to sit there and relearn it myself so I could teach my son. So I got a very wonderful education myself, more than I did in all the years of, public school and going to college. I came away just, I don't know, just yeah, just with such great knowledge, and giftings and learned more about myself and who God made me to be.
It's so cool. I love it. I think, yeah, homeschooling, so it feels like it's growing, at least up here in the north. Um, and so I'm like, what did you do? Like, how do you structure it? So that's awesome. Um, I would love to hear. I know you have a passion for helping people and coaching people and life coaching and things like that. And you had said something before we got on about helping people get unstuck. Could you talk about that? I just love that. Yeah, that
Sure.
concept.
Yeah. I think that one, no one goes through life without some significant events, whether it be the loss of a loved one or the loss of ability to do something, someone being in an accident and they lose an arm, or, there's all kinds of things, and they may not be super severe, but we all interpret things differently, right? So what may be significant to me may not be as much to you, and vice versa. But when we look at other people, it's all significant, the experiences that we go through. And so I realized for myself, we had a pretty tragic loss almost 15 years ago with the death of our oldest son. And it was an accident and it happened very quickly. And so I came to realize about 2 years ago, maybe about three, that I was stuck, and I thought I was doing really well. And I had done, you know, grief groups and whatnot. And I was like, something's just stuck. I feel so like I'm not moving forward. When you start to like research these things, or if you go into counseling or go through like the university program that we went through, you learn that we can have coping mechanisms and things that we do just to get by. And I didn't want to merely just survive. I wanted to thrive. And so I had a kind of a light bulb moment watching um, I'm sure you'll remember her, Dr. Margaret Najib.
Yeah,
And yeah, I was like, okay, you can be stuck in the on or off position
yeah,
after a little T or a big T trauma, is what she called it. And mine was a big T,
yeah.
and I was stuck off. And I'm like, I don't want this anymore. And so after some coaching and being directed to, you really need to see a counselor, I went through some really good counseling. My counselor's in Ireland. It's such a blessing that we can have Zoom to have. I don't, I, all those years, I'm like, well, I wanted to be a Christian counselor. This is so important to me. And not just, oh, I'm a Christian counselor. Like, you're getting your healing through the Lord and the tools I've learned. Like, so it was a blessing that I I didn't find her. My friend found her. She moved to Ireland and found her for me.
Wow.
And this lady has helped me with the Holy Spirit, with the Lord, to get unstuck. And when you get unstuck, it's like boulders have fallen off. I don't carry this backpack of boulders anymore. I feel free and restored. I feel restored. And so I want other women to experience that because it is possible. You know, the person has to want it. And I think you have to get to a point of where you're kind of sick and tired of where you're at. Um, but I think it's a beautiful thing when we can use our experience, like the Bible verse says, and I can't remember, I always forget where it's at. It's in the New Testament, but basically, we love others with the compassion that we ourselves received from the Lord. That's what it's all about. And if I can do that, it glorifies God and it makes what I've been through so worth it, even though it's so painful. It makes it all worth it that I can use it to glorify the Lord.
Hmm. That's so, so powerful. Would you say, as you were going through counseling, like there was some aha, or was it more of like a progress of unpacking things over time?
It was pretty aha. It happened very rapidly. I really started with her, it was last year, this time last year, and within 6 weeks, we tackled the hardest, which was the death of my son.
Yeah.
And after that, things just took off. Now, I'm not saying that there's still things to unpack. Like that wasn't my only trauma, my only, for lack of better words, issue. You
Mm.
know, we all have relationships that we're in and we need to work on, and there's always going to be life circumstances, and we're going to need to talk about it, whether it's with a trusted friend or a life coach or a counselor, um, which I highly recommend having a counselor and a life coach. But,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
whatever people are able to access, it's good to talk about these things and not just sweep it under the rug because it doesn't do anybody any good to do that. Um, we have to talk about them for healing.
Mhm.
Um, and so I would say there was the aha, it happened very rapidly. And I'm still in process. Like I still talk to my counselor, and there was a actually no, it was this week. Um, I had a death in the family from many, 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 many years ago that she helped me with. It
Mm.
was, I mean, it's been almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
And so yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, but for me in the beginning with her, it was very rapid.
Mhm. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, that's so good to hear. Um, for those that are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to the audio, they can't see this, but those on YouTube, there's a sequoia picture behind you.
Oh,
Could you share that story? It's
sure.
amazing.
Yes. So at the time, we lived in Las Vegas, Nevada. My husband was in the military, and our oldest son, Ethan, he's the one that passed away in 2010. It was his dream to go see the sequoia trees. You know, he knew everything about them. We had actually bought him a book for his birthday about the sequoia trees, and he wanted to go. And so I found this amazing deal for $400, all inclusive for night stay um, at a place called Montecito Sequoia Lodge. And so we packed up our Subaru. We drove from Las Vegas, Nevada, over to Kings Canyon National Forest. It was a blizzard. It was crazy, but it was, anyway, it was just amazing. And we made his dream come true. And we had the best time. It was so majestic seeing the biggest thing in the world. that the Lord has created is the sequoia tree. It is the largest living thing on
Mm,
the planet. And to look up, and it's almost like makes you dizzy to look up because these things, they're tall. They're not the tallest tree. The tallest tree is the redwood, but the sequoia is the largest.
mm,
And to see them and the canopy of snow everywhere was so majestic. And I remember being there thinking, how could you not believe that there's not a God when there's this beauty to behold? It was so amazing. So we were able, yes, to do that trip as a family right before Christmas. And yeah, and then we would lose Ethan 6 months later. And, it's only the Lord, he provided that trip for us during it was kind of a hard time for us. So it was amazing that it all came into fruition. And one little trivia thing about the sequoia, there are pine cones out there when you go and see, because there's, I think, lodge pine poles and all kinds of trees, and their pine cones are enormous. And
mm,
you would think the sequoia, no, it's this itsy bitsy little, maybe ping pong ball, maybe a
mm,
little bigger, but it's pretty small. And the little seeds look like oatmeal.
mm. Wow.
It's the most, it blew our mind that there's this huge tree and its pine cones are just very humble
Mm,
and tiny. And yet God made something. It makes me think of the mustard seed,
mm.
right?
Yes.
It's just, yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. And so a friend gave you that picture.
Yes, yes. My dear friend Amy gave me that.
Mm,
Yeah, she sent it in June of last year, because Ethan died in June of 2010, and I've received, many gifts over the years. Some of the others have been wind chimes. One year, a bunch of my friends sent wind chimes because that was Ethan loved wind chimes. Like
mm.
he loved them. I loved the sound of them. So
Yeah.
yeah, throughout the years, I have in our family, we've received just blessings. And um on the 1 year anniversary, we'd moved twice in that year. It was a hard year. And on the 1 year anniversary of him passing away at our new home here in Texas, um, we received, I think, about 3 boxes, and it was called the June box. And it had literally one of the boxes had gone all over the world because being military, we had friends stationed all over the place. And there was a gift to open every day in June to help us get through that really rough time. And oh, it just, it puts tears in my eyes just to even think about it because, like, that's the hands and feet of
Yeah.
Jesus, right? And these lovely people, ladies, had put this together and curated such an act
Mm,
of love and kindness to just to bless us through what was a really, really, really hard time. Not only going through Ethan's death, but also moving yet again and starting over. And it was like Christmas actually almost every day to get up. And
mm.
okay, what are we going to open today?
Wow.
Um, and yeah, it was just so very, very, very cool. Loved it.
Yeah. That's so beautiful, like, and so thoughtful in such a vulnerable season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it
If
was.
if there's a listener who they have a friend going through significant grief like that, like what advice would you give them? Like what obviously that was really thoughtful. Like what else could someone who loves someone who's grieving do like practically? Like what really helped you in that season? Um
Yeah,
yeah.
to be remembered. So I remember right after Ethan died, there was lots of meals that came in immediately, and it was amazing and fantastic. Um, but we were really busy then, planning the funeral. And then we had to leave the state because he was buried in a different state and then come back home. And then it's not that people forget, but you feel forgotten. And it, when you're in the midst of doing all the planning and the funeral, you're kind of running on adrenaline.
Yeah.
And then that fizzles out and you have nothing left in your tank. And so I feel like it's the weeks after people tend to get forgotten, and it's not, I don't think it's on purpose.
Yeah.
We all have to move on with our life. And so I would say reaching out, even if it's just a phone call, sometimes you might have a loved one or a friend that they're, they're too far away. You can't bring them a meal, but you can do practical things like, I guess you could do a DoorDash for them.
Yeah.
Right? Or an
Yeah.
Uber Eats or something. Send a gift card. You could, but the phone call, and I'm really old fashioned. I love handwritten notes. I
Yeah.
think words of encouragement are huge for people, but I would just encourage people to not be afraid. I know some people don't know what to say and they feel like they have to have the right words.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need to be the best listener, oftentimes in any situation, but especially in grief. Maybe there are no words to say except to give them a hug or to just call them and say, I don't know what to say, but I just want you to know that you are on my mind.
Mm.
Just
Yeah.
for people to know that you're thinking about them. Because I know grief can be an awkward, kind of conversation or topic for people, and they shy away and don't say anything. And
Mhm.
for the person on the other end that's grieving, it can feel like rejection or that people don't care. But generally speaking, it's not. I think it's just people don't know how to navigate it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really big thing. And then, you know, for the people grieving though, too, I would encourage them to take help. I used to be fiercely independent, and that became a very, like, the most vulnerable time of my
Yeah.
life. And then we had to move shortly thereafter to a new duty station. And I would have never asked for help. That just was not something that I did. And I remember calling on my core group of girlfriends and saying, "Hey, I need help cleaning my house, like to do the final clean out of base housing.
Yeah.
So I really would appreciate it if y'all could just come over. I don't have a vacuum or anything. It's all on the moving truck. If you can just come over for several hours and we can all teamwork it and get it done." So I think it's perfectly acceptable because there are people that want to help, but sometimes they don't know. And if
Yeah.
you just say, "Hey, I need you to come cut my grass," or "I really need a meal," or I need you to watch the kids for a few hours. There are willing people out there that want to help.
Mm.
Take the help. Take it.
Yeah. That's such good, yeah, wisdom. And asking, like, asking for what you need.
Yeah.
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 So,
Communicating the need. Yeah.
yeah. What are some of your favorite things about your sons?
Hmm. Well, um, let's see. Uh, Ethan, he was very, very, very unique, very intelligent kiddo. I loved how he loved just to read. He couldn't read enough books. He couldn't. And he was 7 when he passed away. So it was kind of amazing. He loved to read. He loved nature, and he always wanted to greet the stranger at church. If there was a new person, he made them, feel welcome in his own quirky way. He was a quirky little kid. Like he was funny. I loved how he dressed himself.
Mm.
And he would not match. And we just let him do it. He
I
would
love,
have this striped shirt on with plaid that clashed. And I just said, okay, it's his style. I'm going to let him go with it. It was very hard, but
mm.
I would let him go with it. Um, yeah. Evan, he's now 19. He's just always been so sweet and compassionate. Like, I've never met a person that is met him and not said, he's just the sweetest, kindest. Like, I think because of what he's been through, losing his best friend,
Mhm.
he understands. I mean, he was only 4 when the accident happened. And so I love his heart of compassion. He's curious. He loves to take things apart, sometimes like tear them and destruct them. But he likes to take things apart. And he's just very curious and has always been curious about the world and never met a stranger. Never
Mm,
met a stranger.
I love
So, yeah,
so
yeah.
so sweet. I love that. Well, I would love to hear about your faith journey. Um, how like how did you have a relationship with Jesus, and how does he communicate with you? Like how do you connect with him? I know we all have like different ways. How do you most
Yeah.
connect?
Well, I would say, what you're talking about connecting, definitely nature. I
Hmm.
feel like I connect outside and just seeing, like, for example, going back to the sequoias, that was just quite a moment for me. You're just in awe. Like, this couldn't have just come out of nowhere. There is an intelligent creator that created this, and it's my father. And so definitely outdoors in nature for sure. Um, I was raised in the church and but I was never forced, to like to be baptized or anything. My mom always said, when you're ready to make that decision, I'm going to leave that up to you.
Hmm.
So I've always, from a really young age, I remember talking to Jesus and all of that. But really where my journey really, really, really hit the floor was having kids. Once you have children, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to get this together. Like, I've
Hmm.
got to get this together. I want my kids to know who Jesus is. And so I was a little bit of a late bloomer, but I got baptized when I was 27 when we were in Las Vegas at the chapel on base and it was yeah, it was just a wonderful experience. And and then after that, I I loved that time. That was such a wonderful time. I would have women's Bible studies in my home, and it was so cool because I would get women from all walks of life, some that were, I believe, came from like Buddhist backgrounds and all different backgrounds that they were curious and they just wanted to learn. And here we all were, in my tiny little base house coming together and just learning more about Jesus. It was a special time.
Wow. Oh, that's beautiful. Um, as we wrap up, what are you looking forward to throughout 2025?
Well, being really intentional and living with intention in my life. Last year was the restoration year and
Mhm.
all of the deep counseling and the healing. And so just being intentional with my time and stewarding my time, being a good steward of the time that the Lord gives me.
Mhm.
I'm just looking forward to that and, you know, the next season of life now that I'm a retired homeschool mom and um yeah, I'm just excited to see where he's going to take me next. Hopefully in a direction that helps other women to get unstuck and become empowered to be
So
the best version of themselves that God made them to be.
that's amazing. Are you currently helping women, or like can they get in touch with you, or are you still kind of in process?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in process. I haven't gotten my life coach certification yet, but I'm always willing to talk to women. So that door is always open.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what draws you specifically towards helping women?
When I look back that I was just talking about the times that I had Bible study in my home, I felt like I connected and I love friendship. I really like to connect, especially one-on-one. I really love to get to know people and their story. And
Mhm.
so I remember those times of being in Bible study and hosting it within my home. I was like, wow, this is really cool. It's like an intimate setting and you just get to learn and people are vulnerable and they would open up and they would share in places they would never share anywhere else because it felt safe.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know, I just feel like that's where I'm called to be is to help other women because I've been helped so greatly. I want to do that for others.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. Yeah, you're really good at it.
Thank you.
Aw.
Thank
Well,
you.
as we end, would you mind just praying a blessing over our listeners? Whatever it comes to mind, you can just share over them.
Sure. Lord, I first of all, I just thank you. Thank you for this time to just share and talk. I pray for everyone that's listening that I don't know what specific thing may have called out to you, but I just pray that you would be filled with the Holy Spirit. And I just pray that the Lord would go before, with, and ahead of you. I pray that you would feel known and seen and heard, and that you know that the Lord loves you right here where you're at. He loves you no matter what. And you are free to come to Him with whatever you're facing. And just know that there's people out there that do care and that they do love you and that you are important and you do matter. And so I just pray that you would leave this podcast feeling the peace that surpasses all understanding. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Shannon. Such a joy.
Yes. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you.